All right, so we're continuing on with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, a book written by M. From all of his time that he spent going to see the master and learning from him, and you kind of get his whole trajectory in the book from the very first chapter with his first argument with Ramakrishna, all the way to the end of Ramakrishna's life, and a little bit beyond, actually, by the end. And so this is it's a great book. It's an account of all of his teachings that he really gave really just off the cuff to everybody visiting him and coming to ask questions, and different groups coming from different places, because he got the reputation quite early on of being quite a sage, and toward the end of his thing, people were calling him an avatar, and there were pundits were getting together to do the formal analysis, to determine whether he was an avatar or not, and were coming through to say that to declare him, to declare that he was, according to these documented signs in the scriptures of how to know whether a person would be of such a caliber or not. But the interesting thing about the Vedanta and about Ramakrishna himself is that doesn't matter at all. He doesn't. It's not required that somebody believe that. It's not required that anybody have an opinion about that. He leaves it entirely up to the individual as to how they see their relationship with him, whether he was just a great teacher or a good man or an avatar or anything along those lines. And so here we're talking about that a little bit here. We just started chapter 25, I think it is, 26, Festival at Adar's house. And we're still on the first day. And I'm going to back up and start a paragraph early, just to kind of keep a linearity with where we left off last week. So he says, but those Paramahamsas who believe in God with form keep the love of God even after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, so that they may teach spiritual truth to others. Right. So he's saying those folks who even have the realization that thou art that, right? And those Paramahamsas, meaning those enlightened souls, those folks that have experienced that nirvikalpa samadhi, that even when they have that highest experience and they know themselves to be one with everything, when they come down to teach, they can't teach while having that knowledge of the universal oneness, because who is there to teach, right? There's one without a second at that highest realization. And so they come back down, and that's one of the signs that they're a Paramahamsa, that they can go into that ecstasy, that ecstatic state of nirvikalpa samadhi, which is that knowledge of the one without a second, and knowledge in the capital K sense, which means it's not just a fact in their mind, but it's a knowing in their being, that they are one, that there is one without a second. And so they're able to bring themselves back down from that, whereas a normal person like you or I presume, are not able to do that. Once we go into samadhi, the body drops off. The body's purpose has been met, and so the body drops off, and you are now one without a second. But for an avatar, for a Paramahamsa, they can choose to come back, and when they do come back, they will keep the love of God. God is form, that attachment, in order to hold a body, because it requires a smidge. It's a Sanskrit word for a small amount. It requires a smidge of delusion in order to maintain a manifestation, in order to have a body. And so, like Ramakrishna used to say, whenever he was in a state and he was needing to be brought down so that he could come back into the room to teach, he would force himself to come up with the desire. He would ask for like a glass of water, or bring me a sweet, or he said that the one that he used regularly to keep his body on the normal basis was a love for the devotees, that he just had a deep love for the devotees and for the expression of devotion. And so that's what he's referencing here. He says, but those Paramahamsas who believe in God with form keep the love of God even after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, so that they may teach spiritual truth to others. They are like a pitcher brimful of water. Part of the water may be poured into another pitcher. These perfected souls describe to others the various spiritual disciplines by which they have realized God. They do this only to teach others and to help them in spiritual life. With great effort, men dig a well for drinking water, using spades and baskets for the purpose. After the digging is over, some throw the spades and other implements into the well, not needing them anymore. But some put them away near the well so that others may use them in the future. Some eat mangoes secretly and remove all trace of them by wiping their mouths with a towel, but some share the fruit with others. There are sages who, even after attaining knowledge, work to help others and also to enjoy the bliss of God in the company of devotees. I want to eat sugar. I don't want to be sugar. So he's saying that there are those folks that go and have this unitive experience, this knowledge, this state of highest bliss, the highest awareness, and they want to come back and share it. They're like, wait, I got to go back and tell everybody else. I got to go help everybody else get over, so that they have that sharing compassion, as it were. But then there are those sages who and regular folks who have that highest experience. The way the parable that Ramakrishna tells is about three young men that hear this wild party going on in this fort, right? And so they want to investigate. So they go and they find a ladder and they go to the wall of the fort and they lean the ladder up against the wall. And the first man runs up and climbs up the ladder. And he looks over and he just sees an amazing party going on. And he just jumps over the wall and joins the party, doesn't yell down anything to the other guys, right? And the second guy gets up there and he wants to, he sees the same thing and he also just jumps in and joins in. He's gone. And the last one gets up there and he looks down and he sees the party and he turns around and yells back to everybody else outside of the fort, get over here. There's a great party happening in the fort. Come, you got to join in, right? And so he's the Paramahamsa. He's the one that has that highest experience. And because of the purity, his first inclination is to share, is to alleviate suffering. And so following that impetus within himself, he comes back down the ladder, tells everybody, and gets as many people over the wall with him before he himself jumps in afterwards. So he continues on. The gopis of Vrindavan too attained the knowledge of Brahman, but they were not seeking it. They wanted to enjoy God, looking on themselves as his mother, his friend, or his handmaid, or his lover. The Bals from Shibpur began to sing to the accompaniment of a stringed instrument, right? We found out earlier they had showed up that day to come ask Ramakrishna some questions. A line in the first song that they sang was, "We are sinners, redeem us, O merciful Lord," the master to the devotees. It is the attitude of a beginner to worship God out of fear. Please sing about God realization songs expressing divine joy, right? So he's saying that at the beginning, it's all right to fear God. That is the impetus of religion. The first impetus, according to Vivekananda, is fear, right? But that fear needs to be transcended, right? And we do that through our practice, coming to an understanding of the nature of divine love, that unlimited, unconditioned love. And as we gain in that confidence, our fear changes to joy, changes to worship, changes to delight, right? And so even though we may at the beginning pray to God, oh, I'm a sinner, please forgive me, please redeem me, please help me overcome all these things, praying for things like that, ultimately our relationship with the divine becomes one of just a natural, spontaneous joy of being. And that's guaranteed. Brahmananda says, he told one young man, the young man was very doubtful about spiritual life and spiritual practice and was wondering, why would I believe you? Why should I even try any of these things? And Brahmananda tells him, he says, look, go and do the practice that I told you to do for 1 year. And he says, if you come back after that year, if you haven't experienced bliss, you can slap me. Right? So that spiritual bliss is a natural factor in practice, not because practice makes you happy or practice makes you blissful, but practice allows you to become aware of your blissfulness, of your bliss, by quieting your mind and by changing your focus of identity from the changing world to the shrine in your heart, the presence of being, the closest place where we can commune with the divine while in a body. So it's the attitude of a beginner to worship God out of fear. Please sing about God realization songs, expressing that divine joy. He turns to recall. How well they sang that song the other day at Nabin Niyogi's house. Be drunk, O mind, be drunk with the wine of heavenly bliss. While singing religious songs, one should not constantly refer to one's worries. One should rather feel joyous and ecstatic as one chants God's name. Right? What's he saying there? He's saying that in your practice, don't have a selfish practice, right? Don't have a practice that has you at the center. That's contrary to what spiritual practice is. Spiritual practice is others centered, and certainly at least God centered, so that your practice is focusing on the qualities of God, not your own nervousness, not your own feelings of shortcomings and whatnot. That you just set aside. You just put aside, you just take God's permission from this promise of faith that's been given to us by our teacher and by the scriptures. We believe that enough, at least, to set those worries aside and then just enjoy the presence, enjoy the beloved. All right. And this is very helpful because, we're all seemingly, I can say, even after 26 years in a monastery, that the tendency of the mind is still that shame and remorse, for a life, because we always know that we're not perfect, that we're not always doing our best, right? That we're not always making every effort in spiritual life. And if we turn our practice into a bemoaning of that, or even into a constant begging for grace and begging for mercy, that's not sustainable, right? Who wants that? That's not a relationship, right? The relationship starts when you accept grace, and once you've accepted grace, you assume your intimacy. You grow that faith, you grow that understanding in the presence, and know that it has nothing to do with you. That your oneness with the divine, it doesn't have anything to do with behavior. It doesn't have anything to do with particularity. That is an eternal relationship that is always present. Ramakrishna is very careful to tell us that we're not beggars, we're heirs to these things. These things are ours already. So we don't have to beg them from God, right? One should rather feel joyous and ecstatic as one chants the names of God. A devotee, oh, sir, won't you sing? Master, what shall I sing? Well, I may sing when the Spirit moves me. Master sings of divine joy. After a few minutes, the Master began to sing, his eyes turned upward. Behold the waves of Gora's ecstatic love. Under them all the universe lies submerged. And in his love, I too long to be drowned. O friend, Gauranga's love hath swallowed me. Who else feels for our misery like Gauranga, dragging us from the mire of worldliness? He sang again, dive deep, O mind. Dive deep in the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the uttermost depths, there you will find the gem of love. Right? And then he sings about the Divine Mother. Can everyone have the vision of Shyama? Is Kali's treasure for everyone? Oh, what a pity my foolish mind will not see what is true. He continues, the black bee of my mind is drawn in sheer delight to the blue lotus flower of Mother Shyama's feet. And again, O Mother, what a machine is this that thou hast made? What pranks you play with this toy, 3.5 cubits high. So we see that he sings a whole bunch of songs here that are that are talking about what he wants us to think about. What is spiritual life about? What is the nature of our practice? What is the nature of this investigation? Right? And the very first sentence says the nature of this, the reason for this is to behold the waves of Gaura's ecstatic love. Find out this nature of love, this love that is the impetus of being, the impetus of the universe, if I could be so bold. Right? To know this love, and through this practice, what? To know that under them all the universe lies submerged. Right? So the nature of this universe, that we are soaking in this unconditioned love, this love for its own sake. It has no motive, it has no demand, it has no requirement. And that we investigate what that means. We investigate what the implications are of a love with no conditions. And through that, we come to find the nature of ourselves, and the whole universe is immersed in this play of divine love. And in his love, I too long to be drowned. To drown what? To drown egoism, right? To die to ourself, our lower self, to die to the body's desires, the mind's desires, and to offer up our nature, the self itself, to the beloved. So there in that first song, you've got the 3 points of spiritual practice. Why are we doing it? What do we hope to see? And what do we lose? Right? What we hope to see is the waves of this unbounded ecstatic love. What we hope to understand is that the whole universe lies submerged in that love, and that in this love too, I will be drowned, right? The death of the ego self will happen. Oh, Gaura's friends, oh friend, Gauranga's love has swallowed me, right? Has taken away my egoism, my separateness from the universe. Who else feels for our misery like Gauranga, dragging us from the mire of worldliness? Right? And here you get that dragging us. So it's not necessarily that you're always running in the right attitude of like, oh, I want this freedom, I want this freedom. There are times when mother's dragging you, where she's like, get up, come on. No, you can do, no, you must do this. Get up, let's go forward, right? And then he goes on to the next verse. Dive deep, O mind. Dive deep into what? The ocean of God's beauty. Right? Keep the mind on the presence of God and see the world as the result of this divine love. And this is those fun little practices that we've talked about, of looking around for, as it were, these little visions of beauty everywhere around us, and take them as little love letters or indications of the nature of God. When you look out here and see just this beauty everywhere, you don't just go, oh, that's beautiful. It place your mind on God. Think, wow, what is behind that beauty? What is that beauty an expression of? Right? Because this is how we find the nature of God. Right? So he says, dive deep, O mind. If you descend into the uttermost depths, there you will find the gem of love. So this gem of love lies within you. Right? So this diving deep is diving deep within. It's going before mind, before body. Right? It's in the silent cavern of the heart, that what St. John calls the cave of the heart, right? What many people know as the shrine of the heart. Yeah. And then he goes on and says, can everyone have this vision of Shyama? Is Kali's treasure for everyone? Oh, what a pity that my foolish mind will not see what is true. Right? So it's dependent on the state of the mind, of who is going to be able to access or find this divinity, to find this ecstasy of being. And that it's the condition of mind that blocks us, right? Because we when we're living in the mind as a thought of ourself, right? When we're living in the world of change, because the world of change is actually just the mind. The mind isn't up here, but for us right now, it is the way that it feels. That's the world of change. The whole universe is in here, right? And it's composed merely of thought, of consciousness, and that all of that consciousness is of the nature of Sat Chit Ananda, right? And so it's coming to know that. The black bee of my mind is drawn in sheer delight to the blue lotus flower of Mother Shyama's feet. right? Drawn means that aroma of love catches us, right? We know that that's our nature. Why? Because everything that we create centers around it. You know, we mention this all the time, but somehow we still forget it. Every novel that you pick up, there's always love in that story somewhere. Every movie you go to see, every poem that you read, every ditty you hear on the radio, you know, everything, all of our arts are always an expression of this beauty, an expression of this higher ideal of this love that we're looking for everywhere. Right. So the black bee of our mind is drawn in sheer delight, right? And that should be the nature, not like a pointing finger like should be, but a freedom type should be, like the potential of your spiritual practice is this sheer delight as you enter into that chamber of the heart and are always surprised by the amount of love that you find there, the amount of bliss that you can find there in yourself. Oh, mother, what a machine is this that you've made? You know, you're sitting in there in that divine bliss, doing the practice and coming to these understandings. You're like, what is this? Amazing. What is this machine that you've made, that you've given me, that is discovering and uncovering and growing and manifesting all of these things, you know, taking me on this trip, this journey. What machine is this that you've made? What pranks you play with this toy, you know, the way that mother plays with us, uh, puts us through all of these incredible situations, these incredible stories that we have to work our way through, puzzles of virtue and vice, you know, working these things out for ourselves. What pranks you play with this toy 3.5 cubits high. That's the average height of an Indian. 3.5 cubits. As Sri Ramakrishna sang this last song, he went into samadhi, right? Samadhi is when the body just freezes. There's no more seeming life in it. The heart slows down to an almost undetected heartbeat. The senses are gone, and the presence of the person is no longer there. And really, what's happened is that soul, that self, is no longer just identified with that particular physical body, but that soul now has spread and is everything in the room, is aware from the perspective of everything in the room. It has the perspective of everything simultaneously. So Ramakrishna in samadhi like that becomes everything. He doesn't vacate and go somewhere. He expands and becomes everything. He's no longer connected with one particular point of preference or view. He's now universal, right? Until he collects himself back into that ego bundle by identifying with that particular body. As Sri Ramakrishna sang that last song, he went into samadhi. The devotees sat speechless, gazing at his radiant figure. After some time, he regained partial consciousness of the world and began to talk to the Divine Mother. Right, so here we get a literal example of what we started with. You know, in the very beginning up here, he said, when a where is it here? That some sages or some paramahamsas, you know, that they come back, that they hold on to the idea of God, the love of God. They keep the love of God even after attaining the knowledge of Brahman. And so we see that playing out here, where Ramakrishna going into samadhi, you know, it's not his first time, so it's not his realization, but it's going into that knowledge that how to talk about it. It's not a place, it's not a state, it's isness. He enters into isness. And in that isness, you know, he's the radiance on his face, the light just beaming out of his being as he's literally in direct knowledge of reality as it is. And the devotees, everyone sitting around is just speechless, just riveted, just staring at this radiant manifestation in front of them. And so holding on to God as he begins to come down into partial consciousness of the world, he begins to talk to the Divine Mother herself. The master said, "Mother, please come down from up there." And then M asks, did he feel his mind still lingering in the seventh plane of consciousness, the 1,000-petal lotus of the Sahasrara? Please come down, he said. Don't torment me that way. Be still, mother, and sit down. O mother, everybody's future is determined by the tendencies of his previous births. What shall I say to these people? Nothing can be achieved without discrimination and renunciation. Right? So he asks mother, what can I say? And then the next sentence out of his mouth is what her response is. Nothing can be achieved without discrimination and renunciation, right? And so how does Thakur teach us to discriminate? He says, look for that which is unchanging. If something changes, it is not real. It's part of the dream. If something is not changing, know that alone to be real. Right. And so you can do this. And it's an exercise for all of us to do. And I've told you probably 100 times now about that one time that I went in search of this truth. I read this scripture and I ran up to the shrine. I thought, well, now I've got something concrete, finally. Certainly I can sit here and come up with the idea of that which is not changing. So I sat there and I was just going through this one, everywhere I was looking. I was trying to think of even one thing that would be an example of something that didn't change. And of course, there's nothing, right? And so I after, I don't know how long it was, almost 3 hours, I think I sat there going through that exercise. And I went down to the lunch table, Swami Prabhutananda, and I told him, I said, Maharaj, Ramakrishna says that which is unchanging alone is real. Everything that changes is unreal. I said, but I can't think of anything that doesn't change. And he said, well, did you consider that which was looking? Right? Meaning that self, that in me that was looking, searching, picking things out and looking at them and discerning, are they changing or not changing? Right? That I, that's in me, that is unchanging. And of course, you can sit and think about that and find it to be true in your own self as you think of the experience of being you throughout these number of years where the body has changed, your life has changed, your mind has changed, everything has changed. But that which knows that everything has changed knows that everything has changed because it itself has not changed. So it can see the change because it is not the change. All right. So that's discernment. And renunciation is the discarding of anything that you determine to be unreal. Right. So you go through and if lust is your problem, you look at what causes your lust, what is the experience of lust. Have you ever been fulfilled by it? Has it ever given you what it promised? Have you ever been glad that you went into that realm? It's like you start discerning and you realize, wow, this has never given me what it promised me. This never gets less. The more I invest into it, the more it demands of me. It's like until it just slowly occupies all your time. You're running around looking for beautiful people everywhere you go all the time, always on the move, always on the hunt, right? This is the nature of things of the world. That's why they call it worldliness. And the mind gets colored with worldliness, means that it's always scanning the external world for its next meal of whatever it is, whatever appetite it's trying to fill. And the scriptures have told us that the eyes will never have enough of seeing. The ears will never have enough of hearing. So at some point, discernment alone is not enough, because once you get to the point where you realize, gosh, that's not really what I want, the body and mind are still in a flow of habit. You've taken them down that road and put them through that cycle so many times that now that the discernment has made you realize, gosh, that's not what I want. Now you have to apply your renunciation, because if you don't apply your renunciation, you're going to do it again anyway, because your samskaras will just push you into it. And so you need that renunciation to discipline yourself, to break the habit, right? The discernment breaks the delusion, but the renunciation breaks the habit, right? So Sri Ramakrishna had now regained full consciousness of the world, and he continued, there are many kinds of renunciation. One of them may be called Markata Vairagya, monkey renunciation. This type of renunciation is a false renunciation stimulated by the afflictions of the world. That renunciation doesn't last long. right? So that by the afflictions of the world, you swear that you have this big fight with your lover and you break up and the relationship's over and you think, oh, I'm going to go become a monk now. I'm not going to do this dating thing anymore. I'm done. Right. But that will only last as long as your memories of the anger and fight that you just had with your partner. Right. In time, that will heal over and you'll be looking for either that partner again or moving on to the next one. Right. So that's monkey renunciation. He says, then there is real renunciation. A man with everything in the world, lacking nothing, feels everything to be unreal. Right. So it's not caused by a trauma. It's caused by an understanding. This I'll share again. I've only got my own stories. I'm sorry, that's all I have. But the time that this really hit me was that night when I was sitting in my room. I had come home from the clubs and I was sitting on the edge of my bed and I was feeling terribly depressed. I was home alone, still alone, sitting there on the edge of my bed and just thinking to myself, God, I'm so unhappy. And I thought there and I thought to myself, well, geez, if you're so unhappy, come up with a plan. Do change. What do you want? And I remember asking myself at that time, I said, Vance, I give you permission now to do whatever you think you need to do to find happiness, to find fulfillment. And so I sat there looking around my room and I realized that after all that I had done, I'd gone to college, I'd gotten my degree, I'd gotten my job, I was making good money, had my own house to live in. And then I was sitting and I was looking around and I realized I hadn't gotten anything more than what I had when I was in college. When I lived in one room off of a garage in Daly City, I realized that my big stereo, my little tiny jam box in the room off of the garage, was now a giant set of 5-foot speakers. The little black and white television that used to sit on my chest is now this 37-inch Sony Trinitron. My one room itself is now a full house. My little scooter was now a car. And I realized I haven't gotten anything different in my life now after all of that effort. And the only thing that has happened is everything has gotten bigger. And me, myself, am still unhappy in the middle of it. It has not changed me at all. And I was sitting there looking at that and realizing that. And I thought, if I keep going on this trajectory, someday this house is just going to be bigger. That one car is going to be the biggest one I can buy or the nicest one I can buy. And maybe then I will start buying hobby cars. My TV can get even bigger. And now I know, looking back, boy, now you can get 100-inch flat screen television on your wall. It's like it would have been true. Everything would just continue to get expanded. And yet in the middle of it would still be me, unchanged, in the same place that I had always been, because circumstances and conditions cannot affect the soul, right? The soul needs and wants to express love and to feel love. To alleviate suffering, to think of others, right? There's nothing in this world to add to ourselves, right? So that is the real renunciation, when a man with everything in the world, all of his needs are being met, and he's lacking nothing, he still feels like this isn't real, like this, what is this? No matter what I put around me, I'm still the same self in the middle of it all. Ramakrishna goes on, it is not possible to acquire renunciation all at once. The time factor must be taken into account. But it is also true that a man should hear about it. When the right time comes, he will say to himself, oh, yes, I've heard about this. Right? So renunciation, it takes time, right? It takes a lot of discernment. You have to slowly pull your white-knuckled fingers, uncurl them from the shovel that you've been using to dig your misery with. You have to pry all of your fingers off of that shovel, because you've got to break the fundamental assumption that the mind has that something out there is what it needs. Right? That was Eve's whole problem in the garden. She looked at that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. She thought it was beautiful. That was her first step. She went into the senses and saw it through the senses. It looked like it would be good, that it would be good for food. She wanted to take it and enjoy it. And the third thing, she thought it would make her like God. It would fulfill her. So she goes outside, and that is where the curse comes from. And we're all living the curse. What was the curse? That all the days of your life, you'll have to toil and scrape at the dust of the earth to fulfill your desires. That was the curse, the sense of fear that they felt when they heard that God walking in the cool of the day. Their first response was fear. And then their sense of vulnerability, their sense of smallness. They saw that they were naked and they hid themselves, right? So all of those things are all factors due to us moving our sense of identity into the senses and then using the senses to find answers to our problem outside of ourselves. And that gives rise to the curse. And that's what all of us are doing. We're having to go and till at the earth. We're having to go to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day to do what? To pay for our desires, to pay for our vacations, our families, our kids, our cars, our scooters, our dresses, our tuxedos, our whatever it is that you're collecting. Right. But at the right time, after you are consistently doing this discernment, after you've shown your earnestness and your sincerity in the effort, then the right time will come and you'll say to yourself, oh, yes, this is unreal. It's not that it seems unreal. It is unreal. It's, yes, it cannot fulfill me. There is nothing that can be added or taken from me in this world, right? And then he says, you must also remember another thing. By constantly hearing about renunciation, one's desire for worldly objects gradually wears away. One should take rice water in small doses to get rid of the intoxication of liquor. Then one gradually becomes normal, right? So he's giving you hope. He's like, do your practice. It may not get fixed in one sitting or 2 sittings. It may not come in 1 year or 10 years, but know that it is in you already and keep going forward, right? Keep taking your medicine. Keep drinking that rice water in small doses until this intoxication with the senses goes away, until the allure of pleasure, the allure of sense pleasure goes away. You will gradually become normal. What is normal? Samadhi, right? Your normal self is in samadhi. Your normal self knows its oneness, but you're not identifying with that self. You're leaving that self hanging on the closet of the shrine of the heart while you're running into the bar of the mind to have another drink. So by constantly hearing, and that's what we're doing today, we're sitting around hearing about renunciation so that we can become normal. An aspirant entitled to the knowledge of God is very rare. It is said in the Gita that 1 in 1,000 desires to know God, and again that among thousands who have such a desire, only 1 is able to know him. A devotee quoted the text from the Gita, the master. As your attachment to the world diminishes, your spiritual knowledge will increase, right? Those things are inextricably linked. You can either have the world or you can have spiritual knowledge. Why is that? Because to enjoy the world, you have to live in the world by creating a thought of yourself, a thought with attributes, a thought with attractions and aversions, a self that has opinions and has a history and a future. All of that exists in mind only. So you move into your mind, which is the universe, which is the changing world, right? Everything of this universe is thought, is consciousness. And so as you lose interest in that, you begin to pull out and become the observer more and more. And as we pull out and become the observer, we start to become aware of something more subtle than the noise of the mind, right? And as the mind begins to diminish in its interest to us, we become aware of the more subtle aspects of being, which become louder within us. Those aspects of wisdom, you see the source of your wisdom, you see the source of your knowledge within, you see the source of your love, you see the nature of divine love. And that atmosphere begins to collect around us that we always talk about. As your attachment to the world diminishes, as you begin to let go of mind and let go of the interest in thoughts and change, your spiritual knowledge will increase, the awareness of that still watcher that you are, the still witness that sits in a peace that passes understanding. You start to become aware of those subtle things, subtle because they make no noise. They don't move or change. Your joy is a permanent joy, right? Stable and unchanging. Your wisdom, a permanent wisdom, stable and unchanging. right? Mind becomes stable and ultimately unchanging. Attachment to the world means attachment to lust and greed, right? The world, this whole universe appears to us because of actually me and mine. And the first manifestations of me and mine are lust and greed, right? And so lust and greed are what define the world that we live in, right? We see male and female because of lust, right? We see good looking and ugly. We see old and young, all because of lust, all because of sexual interest. We see rich and poor, for the same reasons. And even greed is an expression, just of the same expression, but in a different attitude. Greed means that the insecurity of the body drives us to constantly try and be secure in an insecure situation, right? It's the fear that Adam and Eve felt in the garden after they had eaten the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. That fruit of egoism actually is what it was. And so we have an ego self, a small self, and that small self can never be secure because it's based on the mind of constant and unrepeating change. So it's never going to get a foothold. And so it's constantly grabbing, trying to shore itself up, trying to make itself secure, but never will be. So lust and greed are the things that take over when we forget our nature and we start reaching outside of ourselves for what we think we need. It is not given to everybody to feel prema, or ecstatic love of God. Chaitanya experienced it. An ordinary man can at the most experience bhava. Only the Ishvarakotis, such as the divine incarnations, can experience prema. When prema is awakened, the devotee not only feels the world to be unreal, but forgets even the body, which everyone loves so intensely. Right? So he's talking about the experience or the levels of this love of God. For us, we just fall deeply in love with God, right? But for those divine incarnations who can go the whole distance or within a fingernail's distance of absolute freedom, right? That they can go to the point of even forgetting body. And that's what happens when Ramakrishna goes into ecstasy and the body freezes, right? There's no presence there anymore, even though it still lives. He says at that level, they forget even the body, which everyone loves so intensely. In a Persian book, it is said that inside the skin is the flesh, and inside the flesh is the bone, inside the bone, the marrow, and so on. But that prema is the innermost of all. This ecstatic love of God, this ecstatic love, this divine love, is the prana of the universe, is the engine of the universe. That prema is the innermost of all. One becomes soft and tender through prema. On account of this prema, Krishna became Tribhanga. Prema is the rope by which you can tether God, as it were. That's why it's so hard to get, from one of the stories, that God is very conservative about giving anybody pure love for him, because he becomes a slave to that pure love. He can't say no to the devotee who has that kind of love for the divine. Right? So prema is the rope by which you can tether God, as it were. And interestingly enough, Matthew 17, that talking about love as the rope, Jesus calls love the cord, which ties us all into oneness, right? When he prays in the garden of Gethsemane there before his crucifixion, he prays that God might make all the devotees one with him as he is one with the Father, and may the cord of love bind us into that oneness, right? So it's love that's drawing us all back together again. Love is actually is actually the force of gravity that causes us to long for that union, constantly brings us to that desire for oneness, for that fullness. Prema is the rope by which you can tether God, as it were. Whenever you want to see him, you have merely to pull the rope. Whenever you call him, he will appear before you. The mature stage of bhakti is bhava. When one attains it, one remains speechless, thinking of Satchitananda. The feeling of an ordinary man can only go that far. So bhava is this divine love for no reason. It is its own reason, right? It's a deep, unselfish attraction for the beloved. And this is the maturity of bhakti, the path of devotion. So when you've done your bhakti practices, it delivers you to this causeless love of the moment of God, right? The mature stage of bhakti is bhava. When one attains it, one remains speechless, thinking of Satchitananda, right? Speechless, meaning any kind of manifestation, right? Any exertion of action in the world stops. Because why? Because Satchitananda is enough. Because you find what you were looking for. You find what you had forgotten and were thus thinking you were missing. But when you find it, all searching ends, all expression ends, all longing ends. You are content, you are silent, you are experiencing that inner peace that passes all understanding, right? The feeling of an ordinary man can only go that far. So that's game over for us. That is the body has served its purpose. We've come to our realization. We're free, and that's the final outcome for the ordinary person. When bhava ripens, it becomes mahabhava. So if it keeps going, if the person turns out to be Ishvarakoti, either a companion of God, which means like the direct disciples that come with the incarnation, we see that from Ramakrishna. Some of his disciples, he says, were disciples of Jesus. And he points out at different places who was a disciple of Jesus the last time that he came. And then he talks about some of the group, some of his direct disciples who were there when he came as Krishna, right? And he talks about them. And some of them were there when he came as Rama. And so we see, and he names some of those. And so these Ishvarakotis, these men and women that come back with the incarnation whenever he returns, he, she, that returns, those people have this ability to go beyond just this bhava to mahabhava, the great bhava, right? Even beyond that. And that's the last and final statement. You know the difference between a green mango and a ripe one, unalloyed love of God, which means love that is mixed with nothing. It's pure love. Unalloyed love of God is the essential thing. Everything else is unreal, right? So if everything else is unreal and this unalloyed love of God is the essential, it is the real, what is it? What is its primary attribute? It's unchanging, which means the divine toward you always has this attitude of mahabhava, loving you with a love beyond words, beyond any kind of limit, beyond any kind of requirement or action. And our practice delivers us into that love. We find it to be true and trustable, and we begin to take steps of faith and step on it, find that to be secure, and ultimately let go of everything else and find this and dwell and establish ourselves in this amazing realization of what has always been. Once Rama was pleased with the prayer of Narada and told him to ask for a boon. Narada prayed for pure love and said further, "O Rama, please grant that I may not be deluded by your world-bewitching Maya." Rama said, "That is all right, but ask for something else." Narada replied, "I don't want anything else. I pray only for this pure love." Okay. And to my great shock, it's 5:30, so let's stop here for the day.